everybody, I'm Daniano. Welcome into an all-new episode of That Recap Show. Now, before we get into the episode, just want to issue major spoiler alert. We are going to be going over everything that happened in the Flash movie. So if you haven't seen that yet, you may want to pause this video, head to your local theater, check that movie out, and then come back and enjoy the breakdown. Now, with that out of the way, let's start the show.
Poppin' Off presents That Recap Show.
All right, joining with me to break down everything from the Flash movie, it's Jon Rico.
Hello.
Hello.
How we doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good. You know what? I was sick for a little while. I'm starting to finally, I'm coming out of it. So I'm starting to feel, mentally I'm all better. Like I still feel not so well, but I feel much better.
Good.
And as a celebration for that, I saw the Flash movie.
Yes. Yes.
I was really hoping I was going to feel better after the weekend so I could go see it because I was in rough shape.
It was looking rough there for a second.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I mean, look, I enjoyed the movie. And that's saying something because, there are so many superheroes that, I have a very fondness for. Obviously, Spider-Man. I've brought that up many a time. Iron Man, Batman. There's a long list, and Flash is on there, but it's not in my my top. So yes, I was very excited. Like I was interested in this movie in general, and I wanted it to be good because like that's what I've always said. My philosophy on Marvel and DC, I want both of them to be good because I think competition is what's going to make both studios better. And so I'm always rooting for both movies or for both movie houses, I guess, to be better, so that we just keep getting better and better films. But one thing I do have to say that I kind of think we're seeing now is that this may have been a bit overhyped. Not that it kind of ruined my experience, because I mean, there's parts of this movie that I really, really liked, and I'm going to talk about them and my takeaways and stuff like that. But when we had some of the first screenings coming out of CinemaCon, and even before that, I think we were having even earlier screenings before CinemaCon, we were getting this billed as the greatest superhero movie ever. And I just think, that might have been a little bit of a stretch. And that's not to say that, the movie's bad. It's just to say that I think labeling anything like that creates a little too much overhype for anything. And look, we were talking about this before we started recording. Marvel has fallen victim to this also. I think, one of the big reasons that, the newest Ant-Man movie kind of crashed and burned as much as it did was because it was overhyped as being like this monster movie where it was Ant-Man versus Kang and it was going to be this really big showdown type of thing. And it kind of wasn't. And so I think, overhype kind of hurt this a little bit. And like I said, there are a lot of parts of this movie that I like and I enjoy, and it didn't take away from that. But I can see where there are parts that, for me, there are other movies I enjoyed as a whole better than this. But like I said, positives and negatives about every movie. And I'm excited to talk about, everything that I really enjoyed from this movie. And yeah. I could go on and on and on, but Rico, what were some of your initial impressions of the Flash movie?
Yeah, expectations are an interesting thing, right? Especially when we're talking about early reviews and such. And I think anytime if you hear anything come out say this is the greatest whatever ever, it's like, okay, you're saying that, but you sound like you're overhyping it up a little bit. I always say like set your own expectations, and if you like it. Yeah, you like it, right? Because again, these are all movies. This is art. This is all subjective at the end of the day. So no one should be able to tell you how to feel going into a movie other than yourself. That being said, the Flash is one of my favorite characters of all time. reading the comics. I love the TV show on CW. I thought that was probably a great way for the general audience to kind of get introduced to these to the characters within his world and kind of set up what he's all about. And then, of course, the way he's been used in other stuff like video games and animation. This particular story, the Flashpoint story that this is kind of adapting has been seen, in both the TV show and in animated movie form, and both great versions of it, by the way. Um, and for this one, in the DCEU sense of it, I thought this was a fantastic adaptation of that story within this universe that they've kind of created. One being like a send off for Zack Snyder's DCEU, and also kind of like opening this gateway for other things to happen in the future, right? So for me, my expectations were personally met, and there's a few criticisms I can't disagree with, and I think that's probably like the CGI and some of the scenes is a little bit like cartoony. One of my favorite sequences in the movie has some pretty questionable CGI in the beginning of the movie, but again, it's stuff that I can forgive at the end of the day, especially when I saw that. When it comes to like the speed scenes, like it was kind of explained that he kind of see things in that way, so I can kind of forgive those parts a little bit. But it's, there was some parts where it was like, okay, this looks a little bit rough. And then there was some like I felt there could have been some pacing issues at some parts of the movie as well. But the action to me was really really solid. I think the way you use his powers and in this movie was just really creative and a really fun way to enjoy in the movie theater. And of course, Batman has some really great action scenes as well. Some of the best we've ever seen him in the movie theater. And the music I'm listening to as we record right now was just some of the best I've heard in a while. I think Andy Muschietti and this guy Ben Wallfish, I think is his name, have a really good combination because he also did the It movies, which Andy Muschietti directed. And I really like the way they throw some nods to the classic scores, both Batman, Superman, and other heroes as well. And yeah, there's some really great emotional moments in this movie as well, and some of the performances behind them that help carry it. Just I felt like it was a really cohesive story to me, and especially for like a multiverse time travel movie, it was like I understood like what was going on, like as far as like not being too confused with the rules and such. I even love the spaghetti scene that was kind of explaining the way that everything works. So I thought, okay, they kind of like did a good job of explaining how things work in this way as far as like multiverses go. And I was like, okay, I can dig this. So yeah. Yeah, I love this movie, and I'm really yeah. There's a lot to go on and on about, but we can talk about it in the takeaways.
Yeah. I mean, what you were talking about with the spaghetti scene leads perfectly into one of my main takeaways from this
Yeah.
movie. So, Rico, would you like to get into some takeaways?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna kick us off because I just have one name that I have to repeat: Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton. I was hoping it would work like Beetlejuice. Anyway, I loved having him in the movie. What if he just popped up behind you? That would be
really great.
Want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
But I loved having him in the movie. Look, I think both of us were a little too young to appreciate Michael Keaton as Batman at the time. Like, I definitely saw them, but it wasn't like I was like witnessing. We neither one of us ever saw him in the theater as Batman type of thing. But he was great. And I feel like not only him as Batman, but him as Bruce Wayne stole every scene he was in. And that goes back like right away to the spaghetti scene when you were talking about it, where he gives a perfect explanation of the multiverse and how this works differently than Back to the Future, which got referenced multiple times in this movie. But how it was explaining that, you're changing timelines in a universe, both past and present. You're not just changing what's happening moving forward. You're changing everything that's happening from a point moving forward and backwards. So it's a really cool explanation, but just the delivery from Michael Keaton, I just think every scene he was in, like I said, I think he shined in this movie. And I loved every single scene that he was in, from his introduction as, and I give it his introduction the equivalent of when Thor fell off the wagon in Endgame, because he was like that. He was definitely partly drunk. He was wearing one flip flop, and he was out of it. And so like from going from that to clean shaven as Batman and just like kicking ass as Batman. Like he, couldn't take down any Kryptonians, but he couldn't kill any Kryptonians, but he definitely took down the biggest one by himself.
Oh yeah.
It was definitely during one of the redo times, but he was still able to do it. So I'm giving him points for that. But just incredible. I absolutely dug every part of Michael Keaton's performance in this movie. I cannot say that enough. Also, I loved Supergirl's performance in this movie. I have never really read any comics for Supergirl. I know Kara from Smallville, and that's my only kind of reference to Clark Kent's cousin, to Kal-El's cousin, or anything like that. So just having Supergirl in this movie and kind of having a different perspective of, the Justice League. I know they started to call it that towards the end. It was really cool having a different person playing the Superman role, I guess, or the main tank of the team role, I guess, being able to take on kind of everything. I thought she gave a great performance, and we were both talking about this when I got out of the movie. When I was telling you that I'd seen it, really would love to see this actor in anything else that we can, and even even if we can have somehow have Supergirl in the new DCU, I would love that too. But yeah, I mean, and that's not, look, I liked Barry playing off of Barry. There were some parts in there that I really enjoyed, kind of them kind of going back and forth, especially in, like you had just mentioned, in some of the battle scenes towards the end of the movie where they were really playing their powers right off of each other, like charging up and hitting off of each other. Those kind of scenes were really cool. But I just think, for me, Michael Keaton was the standout in this movie. And I absolutely love that. And that's not to take away from any other actor in this movie. But yeah, I was just, from my takeaway for real, I had to say Michael Keaton as many times as possible. But Rico, what were some of your takeaways from this movie?
Yeah, Sasha Kaye is really good as Kara Zor-El in this movie. We've had a couple versions of Kara in movies and TV, of course, like the one we saw in the big multiverse sequence played by Helen Slater alongside Christopher Reeves. And then of course we had Melissa Benoist play in the CW show, and she was really great in that as well. Right. This was definitely a very different take than we've seen. She's a little bit more darker, and the thing about her compared to Clark is that she was actually a teenager when she got sent off of Krypton, so she's got a little bit more like angst to her, and of course, like she's kind of seen like this darkness in humans, so she's very different than Clark in that sense. She's like, why would I help you guys at all? Like as soon as I got here, you guys just locked me up and turned me into just like this weak little human. And I also love that scene when they break her out and she finally gets some sunlight, and you see that immediately her hand changed from like this grayish hue to like the perfect skin color, and it's just like, dang, that was really cool. It was so subtle too, because they kind of did it really fast, and then when of course Michael Keaton puts his hand down, you see her just fully soaking in the sunlight, flying. You're like, dang, that was really badass. And the moment between her and Zod too, where they have like that big confrontation when she asks him like, what did you do? And you find out what happened to that universe's Clark, was just she had really powerful moments in just the little amount of time that she was in the movie. Right. She was kind of written to be a little bit one note because she's only in this final act of the movie, basically. But it made you want to see more of her, right? Because she was a big standout in that regard. So yeah, there's a few things I want to talk about here in my takeaways. I guess I'll kind of go more in sequential order, even though there's not really an order. But the beginning of the movie starts off with Barry, kind of in a hurry. He's got to get some food in him because his calorie intake is really low. And so while he's waiting for this really annoying barista to finish his meal, he gets a call from Alfred.
Oh my God! Flash!
Hi.
I love you.
Thank you.
Passing you into Mr. Wayne.
And he's got to go handle this robbery attempt in Gotham, and we find out it's the Falcones that were doing the robbery attempt, and he gets to go help out Ben Affleck's Batman one last time, and it's this great sequence of him, saving a bunch of babies that got rolled out of the hospital, which is like right away when I saw that happen, I go, okay, we're going here. And we
And
get
a
this,
dog
and a
and a
dog, yes,
nurse.
and the dog, and the dog, and the nurse, yes, the nurse. But we get this great slow motion sequence, of course. Well, slow motion for us, but it's a speed sequence of Barry saving all these people in one little go, including putting a baby in a microwave, which was just hilarious. It was a great, hilarious way to showcase his powers early on in the movie. I even like the way when he's winding up to go and they're like showing the logo for the movie, and then he gets interrupted.
He gets
And then
hit
he
with a
gets to go
candy
back
bar.
to
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So that was great. So, but another thing I loved about that opening sequence is it was kind of like this. It felt like a little final love letter to the DCEU Justice League, because we got to hear like a little reference to every single member at the time. We got to see this little TV version of Clark handling something in another part of the world. Wonder Woman didn't answer the phone, but then she gets to have that great cameo at the end of the scene. And then, of course, Ben Affleck's Batman is heavily showcased here in a great action sequence. Some of his best action work outside maybe the warehouse scene and BVS. But it just felt like the Justice League was working in this cool cohesive level, and like hearing them interact as they're doing everything, like it just felt very much like reading the books to me. And it just felt like it was like a cool goodbye to like those actors. I feel like, especially Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. She's gotten two chances recently to kind of do these cameo appearances in these DC movies, Shazam recently, and now this one. And this one felt a little bit more like earned. I think it just felt like it fit more in this one than it
Yeah.
did in the Shazam movie. So I'm glad if this is our last time seeing her in this role. This is a cool little like last time to see her, in my opinion. So that was a great little sequence, and of course, at the end, Barry gets his sandwich done by that very, very slow barista, because I don't know how he didn't finish the order and all the time that it took for him to get all that crime stuff done.
We was putting every raisin on individually.
Every
You saw that
single one. Yeah, man. Jeez, that was crazy. And then right from there, we get like this cool little glimpse into Barry's relationship with his mom. We get like the initial relationship between like the DCEU Barry and his mom, and that led into the events of her death. And then of course that's what leads him into wanting to change up the events, right? Um, Another thing I really liked is how their version of the Speed Force, which is the Chrono Bowl. I thought this was a cool take on like how he sees events in time. It was really is supposed to just seeing things and like just running linearly, and then you look around and you just see these events. I think that's something we were kind of used to seeing as fans.
Right.
So this is a very creative way. But we talk about the weird cartoony CGI. I felt like it worked though in this particular instance, because he's just looking at things in this weird like Coliseum like structure, but everything's not really real. So I did really like that. And I really like the way they play into like the relationship between him and the two Barrys, Ezra Miller. So these kind of two things go hand in hand: the relationship with his mom, but also Ezra Miller's performance overall. They is very great in this movie as both the older Barry and the younger Barry. We were talking about in Shazam how Billy doesn't feel the same as Shazam because they feel like they're two different ages in the way they act. Um, because he has to play these two different versions, but Barry is like you can feel one is more mature than the other because he's
Right.
also seeing this younger reflection of himself, and he's like, okay, and I'm starting to see how annoying I was to other people, and now I gotta kind of see, or I can grow from that, but also I gotta help this other guy grow through his new experiences by making him have his powers now at 18 years old. So I really like that dynamic and the way those two Barrys played off of each other. It was just really fun watching them. One of my favorite scenes is when Barry doesn't have the older Barry doesn't have his powers anymore, and he starts to do his run, and he starts to do that floppy looking run, and he doesn't have the powers anymore. He goes, "Oh well, okay, that's not good."
He goes, shit.
Yeah, shit. So the comedy they play off each other is really well done here, and of course him teaching him how to phase and all that was really great. I just love the way they introduce phasing and stuff like that in general. Um, and then of course at the end of the movie, when he decides he has to fix everything, he has to undo the things that lead to saving his mom, and he has that great face to face moment with his mom in the store. That is one of the probably most emotional DC scenes I've probably seen in a while. I was definitely in tears watching that one. And that woman who plays his mom is just really great in this role. Like in the little
Yeah.
screen time they have, they do a really good job of like displaying that relationship between them, particularly between her and the younger version of Barry. I wish I knew the young actor's name, but they're really great together. And of course, the way they banter off each other, and then of course, kind of seeing the way he got to see the way he would be if she was still around through the younger Barry, so he got to kinda have that piece as well. So I really love the way, like, one of there was always these moments that had to happen, right? He learned through the big battle, like, whatever happens, Supergirl dies through those moments, so he could save one parent, but probably not the other. So
Right.
he does the can at the top of the shelf and ends up saving his dad, and, I really love the way they play around with those moments of how he's, like, able to make those decisions and goes, okay, if I can change this one little thing, like, okay, I can take the can out of the car and put it on the top shelf. Now everything's set this way. And he can live on this universe that may not be his own, but it's one he's content with living in. And it also creates this opening of like, well, what does that mean for the future? Like, what did he just do by doing that? So it would be interesting to see what goes on with
Well,
this.
he got rid of Ben Affleck as Batman. That's what he did.
It led to one of my favorite cameos maybe of all time.
You want to just say it? I don't want to take
Yes,
it from
yes.
you.
George Clooney came back, and I know what I heard is that there were multiple versions of this particular scene where they showed either Keaton or Robert Pattinson showing up at the end of the movie. And so one of the things like I like that they play around with that, and I like to see if they would like release all three versions and like a behind the
That'd be
scenes
cool.
thing in the future. But I also like that it also establishes that like, no matter what, this version of Bruce knows Flash in this universe as well, and, I just really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean that was great, and that was I think one of the only like really surprises that I didn't like I went oh shit seriously because
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I didn't obviously hear about. I mean I didn't look anything up before I went to see this movie, but you know pulling the veil away, I didn't get to see this, when I normally see it, like Thursday
Mhm.
or Friday of opening weekend. I waited until Monday because I started to feel sick. I wasn't able to really do anything and go to the theater or anything until Monday. So there was reviews, there was everything out basically. I tried to stay off of social media as much as possible, but that was one thing that I didn't hear anything about.
Right.
Now, just because I really enjoyed Keaton through the entire thing, I think that would have been I would have enjoyed that ending a little bit better if Keaton had stepped out of the car. Um,
Hmm.
because then I would have just been like, "Oh shit, he gets the Batman that he couldn't save. Now that is his Batman now moving forward." And I just thought that would have kind of been like a cool just ending note being like, "Now you get a chance to actually this is the Batman you get to work with moving forward now." Um but yeah, I mean, I I would really like to see like if they have that in bonus features like
That would be
have
really great.
yeah, I think that would be a really I'd get a kick of that. And then yeah, we did get Arthur Curry as the end credit scene. So
Yes,
we
it
we
did.
completed the entire Justice League bingo card.
Yes, that was great. Yeah, because everything else we saw through either Chronable events. The only one we didn't really get was Cyborg, which of course, given his relationship with Warner Brothers at the time, it makes a lot of sense. But I would have like we still got a nod to what he was doing, I think, or he got referenced at least at was
He got
one
referenced
time.
a lot. He looked him
Yeah, he
up
did.
as soon as he
Yeah,
got there, but
yeah, exactly.
yeah. I mean, it's just it speaks volumes for what this movie might have really actually been. Because I mean, they've been writing this for a really long time.
Oh, this movie's been in the works for years.
Originally, it was
Yeah.
supposed to be a Flash and Cyborg movie, so I'm
Mhm.
wondering if, like, that would have been that scene, maybe that was just a reference to what the old plot would have been, like, maybe he
Yeah.
would have really been able to find Cyborg right away, and then it would have been both Barrys with Cyborg moving forward type of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to speculate on how the movie would have turned out differently and what everything would have been.
Oh, yeah.
There was one thing I definitely wanted to touch on was, and I know you said it kind of more in the open and not so much in your takeaways, but yeah, Flash, the superhero might not be in my super top like tier superheroes, but
Mhm.
Flashpoint storyline, I love. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just like you said, I mean, we've talked about the cartoon that's on Max still
Mhm.
now. I've watched that a bunch of times. I love
Yeah.
that. And yeah, the Flash TV series, the
And the
Flash.
comic, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like I've always said throughout this, you're coming from a comics background. I'm coming from, you
Yeah.
know, a more media background, like, and then I'm going towards the comics. Like when I find something like that I really enjoy, then I do try to go to the source material
Mhm.
and read more of the comics and stuff like that. But I'm just not coming from that background.
Yeah. The
But
comic and the animated movie are pretty close, though.
oh,
Like, it's a pretty much an adaptation of that, yeah. So it's
okay,
still but it's still a great use of, like, how you change up different versions of the characters and how
right,
they work, but yeah.
yeah. The only thing that I was a little bit upset about was that we didn't get a cameo from Grant Gustafson from the Flash TV series.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they did it in the show. They had Ezra Miller in the show
Yeah.
during one of their crisis events, I think. Like he popped in all of a sudden.
They had a wide range of DC TV and film actors. I think they just kept it more limited to film. All the one like especially the big multiverse scene. Like we went through all these characters that had movies. Even the Adam West Batman had his own movie at one point. So I think they were just trying to keep it to that. I
Mm,
think if they could just throw in as many as they wanted. um, but yeah, but I think the only other TV one I think I saw in there was the other Flash, the Jay Garrick Flash. It
right.
was the one from the TV show, which I thought was pretty cool. It took me a while to notice it when I first saw it because I was like, "Who is that?" It doesn't look like I was hoping it would be John Wesley Shipp from the original '90s Flash. That would have been pretty cool. But you did like the CW Flash version of him. I think that would have been a great nod to both, like the modern and past versions of the Flash too. But either way, I was like, I can't believe they threw in all these things. Nicholas Cage Superman freaking showed up for gosh sakes. Like
A
it's
giant
wild what
mechanical
a
spider.
giant yeah, and that scene looked freaking cool. Like if I imagine it wouldn't have looked really cool back in the day when they were planning to make that movie, but it looked pretty cool in that scene.
But I mean, just like we've been saying over and over, and we can go on and on and on. And I mean, our takeaways and recaps from movies definitely go longer than when we
Oh
do
yeah.
series and
There's a
stuff
lot
like
to
that.
cover.
So maybe when we get a digital release from this, like maybe we'll go back through it and we'll do another, just like what we were saying with what was the last movie we were saying that from?
Spider-Verse.
Oh, yeah, Across the Spider Verse. We were saying like maybe we'll do a part two. So maybe we'll do a part
Mm.
two for this.
Oh yeah, there's a
But
lot.
yeah, but before we go too far or too long, I guess you want to do some predictions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. All right, why don't you kick off predictions?
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about like the Flash's future and whether it would be the DCU or Elseworlds because I think that's really what's really great about like what we have going on here with Gunn and Safran running DC right now is that we know we have two separate ways of telling stories for DC. We have the Elseworlds, which is where you have like the Jokers and stories like that, which don't play into the DCU. And if you want to continue this version of the Flash without worrying about tying him into that overall big story that you're trying to tell in the DCU, like just do another story as an Elseworld story. And I think there is room for a sequel in this if they want to tell it. I think that of course we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. But I think the only big factor is the Ezra Miller stuff, which is like that's the only real factor that can probably determine whether this gets a sequel or not. But if they were to do a sequel of this particular Flash story, there's a particular part of this movie that like is still kind of left open in the air after the events are all over. We don't really know who killed Barry's mom. Like they distinctly do not show the act that actually kills her. We just see her, of course, with the knife in her, and of course, his dad saying like, "Go get help." If you've seen the show, you know how it all worked, and the comics too. We all know the work of Professor Zoom, who is kind of like a big, uh, uh, clearly like the Reverse Flash is a version of the Reverse Flash, but he's one of the Flash's main villains, of course, and I think if you want to set up a version where he is the next villain of this story, I because when I was watching, I thought that the older Barry kind of like speed demon looking thing was Reverse Flash. I'm like, that's an interesting take on Reverse
Mm.
Flash. Uh, But then, of course, it was revealed to be an older version of Barry, which I really liked. But it also leaves the door open for an Eobard-Thon to be the next villain. Of course, like if you need like a step up in villain, like who better than the one that he actually finds out killed his mom? And especially when you're talking about the levels of speed within the Speed Force, like if Zoom is faster than this version of Barry right now, then he's working on a completely different plane where, of course, he didn't see that happen. So I think you set up a different story, a cool story there, which plays into familiar story ground as far as if you've watched the Flash show, we've seen these speedster stories before, over and over. But again, when you're talking about the big screen, it's just you're talking about another level of effects and what you can do there, bigger scales, right? So I think that's something to look forward to. Um, I'm looking forward to see how like the way this whole like Barry and Arthur Curry at the end of the post credit scene, what version of Arthur we're getting in the Lost Kingdom. Is it going to be the DCEU, the final DCEU appearance of that Aquaman, or is it this Aquaman from this world that Barry created? Like, where is this story going to lead to? Is there going to be a reference to like Barry no longer being in universe on the Aquaman sequel or something like that? Like, how far ahead do they think for these movies? And like, so it's gonna be interesting to see where that movie lands and what his future could be in the DCU, because Jason Momoa has teased some big things for the DCU going forward, Lobo and such.
Yep.
So that would be interesting to see going forward. And also, I can't wait for Andy Muschietti to do Brave and the Bold, the Batman movie for DCU. I just think he has a really cool kind of like knowledge on the Batman character. He handled multiple versions of him in this one movie, so if he gets this one version with the Damian Wayne character to kind of handle in this whole Bat family, I would love to see it.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, look, there are definitely a bunch of ways we could go with this. I kind of looked at it as this was their way of kind of saying like this is ending. This is how it ended. We now have an in-universe explanation on why we're going to see characters with different faces and why we're going to see characters who might have a little bit different, like some differences, right, and things like that. So I looked at the end of this movie, minus, I guess, the post-credit scene. I'm not really including that in my explanation for the ending of this movie, but I looked at this more of like, this is a perfect in-universe explanation for how the DCEU as we know it has officially ended, and now we have the DCU, because things are going to be different. Actors are going to be different. Characters are going to have different things like that have shaped them and are going to shape them moving forward. And we're going to see, the rise of different characters and stuff like that. So I just kind of I saw this as that this is the perfect in-universe explanation for the beginning and end of a new DCEU. That's how I saw it, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. It also kind of explains, like he says right there, like in my world we have an Alfred too, but of course those Alfreds are different people. But in some versions, like, okay, well, in every single world, this person's always the same, like same person, I think, essentially, right?
That's what we think. Let us know in the comments below. What did you think of the Flash movie? And look, did you enjoy Michael Keaton as much as I did as Batman? Whether you were old enough to be able to enjoy him his first run as Batman in the movie theaters, or whether you're like us, we never really got to enjoy the theatrical experience of having a Michael Keaton Batman. but you know what? There's no wrong answers. Let us know in the comments below, what were your favorite parts of this movie? And as always, don't forget, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to hear about all of our latest audio and video podcast releases. Bye, everybody!
Poppin' Off presents That Recap Show.